Many couples today say that they're deeply committed, they're completely in love, but happier when they have their own space, their own routines, and even their own addresses at times. Is that a sign of a healthy modern partnership, or does living apart undermine the very foundation of marriage? That's what we're speaking about in today's African View debate. Join us to include yourself on the debate today and let us know which side you stand on. That's the conversation we're having. Can you love your spouse but still choose to live apart? And should marriage require sharing a home? Joining us on the debate for today is Sipati Mbokazi, who is a relationship coach, as well as Sandra Delali, who is a marriage counselor and relationship coach, as well as author of the book Marriage Maintenance. Thank you to both of you for joining us in today's debate. I'm going to start with you, Sandra, for the conversation. Let's hear your opening statements for today's debate.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm so excited to be here. Can I love my spouse, be married to him, and still live apart? I would tell you that the answer is no. I'd prefer to live with a spouse in the same home, in the same space. Just because you want to build a family, you want to build a home, you want to have a great relationship with the person you are with. You want to be emotionally connected to the person you are with. And so I would honestly say, I've heard people talk about getting married and living in two separate homes. And recently, I think one of your people, a very renowned person, I love him so much. His name is Noah and Trevor. He said he doesn't think that he can live in the same space with a spouse simply because he wants his space. And I'm thinking, what is the essence of getting married if I want to live separately from you? Unless maybe it's for a time and for a season, but permanently, my answer is no.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement, Sandra. Let's hear from you, Sipati. What are your thoughts on this one?
Good morning, Palesa, as well as the listeners. I think for generations, we've treated living together as some sort of sacred badge of marital legitimacy, right? It's like a trophy. We claim that just because we live together, we're actually a couple. But when we start looking at how modern society is so daring, we honestly live our truth, we can actually realize that living separately may save a marriage far better than sharing the same roof ever could. I mean, even if you take it to the villages, in some cases it still happens where the mother stays with the children in the household and the father goes into the city to actually go and work. They're married but live separate lives and they're thriving in most cases. So in this day, I definitely say that living separately can make a marriage better.
That's so interesting, right? Because, both of you are coming from different perspectives, but I want to stay with you there, Sipogazi, because someone could challenge that and say, then how do you build a bond? Because proximity is that wonderful recipe, right, that makes the relationship stronger. If we're living apart, then proximity is a big test.
The famous words, familiarity breeds contempt, right? And it's a famous saying by virtue of the fact that when you're living together and you're at such close proximity, the mystery of who your partner is starts to disappear, right? The habits that they have now all of a sudden encroach on everything that is your life. The romance suddenly disappears because he forgot to close the cupboard doors when he opened them, or he left his socks and shoes. And so the focus then becomes on the things that your partner doesn't do right according to yourself, as opposed to the romance and actually being together in that home. Living separately as individuals, you realize that you can live apart, but you protect each other's identity. So you protect yourself as an individual, your hobbies you still get to do without losing yourself in that marriage. What we often find is when couples are living together within proximity of each other, they tend to blend so much into the other that you don't know where the one begins and the other ends. And you lose your identity. And that often breeds contempt, it raises blood pressure, and in most cases, you start to actually hate each other as opposed to be romantic and in love with each other.
Blood pressure, yo.
All right, Sandra, I want to bring it back to you because in your closing statement, in your opening statement, you said, you know what would the purpose then be of getting married in the first place if you do not want to share space? I know it's the traditional way that we do things. You get married and then you live together and then, that's how it should be. But are you saying that, we can't think more individually when it comes case by case per relationship? Because it seems like we've been following the same routine, the same systems that we had traditionally, that we were told this is what happens when you meet someone, this is what happens when you get married. Should a couple not perhaps decide to do things in a way that perhaps meets their own individual needs within that relationship space?
So thank you for that question. Every marriage is tailor-made, like I say it. You can't compare your apples and pears. It's totally different. So every marriage has its own, however they want to do it, right? And so if you're saying that couples cannot live together, cannot live apart, couples can live apart. However, when it comes to building a proper family, unless that, let's say, due to whatever situation or circumstance you are in, you can't be in the same space as your spouse, then that might be allowed for a time and for a season, but it cannot be a permanent thing. Now, when you're talking about, I think let's see if I can pronounce your name properly, okay? Sipati, am I right? Fantastic. Okay. Right. So she was talking about how familiarity breeds contempt. However, marriage is a mystery. And you as an individual, you are a mystery that your partner should now learn to unravel. It takes a lot of intentionality to be in the same space as the other person, because you might try to now get into know, like you're saying, I'm just quoting you, right? Because I think it's very interesting where your partner opens the cupboard, leaves the socks lying around and all that. You've got to be intentional. You have to learn, to unlearn, to relearn how to live in the same space as the other person, how to build a relationship with your, even sometimes with your own kids, they get on your nerves. And a few minutes ago, my oldest daughter, she came back from uni and I just did something and she was complaining and she got on my nerves like just 2 minutes ago, right? And so I think that as human beings, we have to be intentional about who we live with. And so marriage as a mystery that we're trying to unravel, we need to be very intentional about living in the same space, the same atmosphere, and at the same roof with this other person that we want to be with. Now, building emotional connection is important. You can build emotional connection with somebody that you don't actually live with apart, but when it comes to emotional intelligence, you need to learn. When it comes to emotional intimacy, you have to be in close proximity. When it comes to sexual intimacy, you've got to be in close proximity. So do I only come to you or do I only visit you when I want to be touched or when I want to have sex with you? No, it has to go beyond that. And so for me personally, in as much as we might think that modern marriages is probably evolving into we living in two different places, I don't think that is right. If we can't say it is modern and so we do things anyhow. And you also made a reference to people living in the villages where mothers were living with children and the fathers were somewhere else. How do you build a family like that? And I say it can be for a season and for a time, but it can be a permanent thing.
All right, we need to take a break. This is a heated one. Different views coming from our guests. That's Sandra Delali, who's joining us from the UK there. Sandra is a marriage counselor and a relationship coach, and also an author of a bestseller, Marriage Maintenance. And also we have Sipati, who's joining us. That's Sipati Mbokazi, who is a relationship coach. Want to get your thoughts on this one? Remember, at Channel Africa 1, we've got that poll that is moving. We're asking you the question, married but living apart, is it genius or chaos? Giving you 4 options there. It's genius, space is healthy. Second option is chaos, we must live together. Third option is I've got mixed feelings about this one. And then the fourth option is depends on the vibe. How are we vibing? Give us your thoughts on the conversation that we're having today. At Channel Africa One is that X handle where you can give us your thought on our morning poll.
Siyabangena manje. Vito iJabulani Nkolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. Very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
Where are the firemen? There's a lot of flames in studio today. Our debate is definitely heated. We're speaking around the question, is it a sign of health, a modern relationship when we live apart but we are in a relationship? Or does living apart undermine the very foundation of marriage? We having a dynamic conversation with some great guests who are debating this one. Sipati Mbogazi is joining us, a relationship coach, and also we have Sandra Delali, who is a marriage counselor, author, and relationship coach. Let me come back to you, Sipati, on this one, right? Because I heard there, Sandra, challenging you on multiple fronts there. Let's start on the front whereby there is a suggestion that it is hard to grow together. It's difficult to actually unearth the differences that you might have or learn from each other if you are living apart. What do you say to that suggestion?
I think for many of us, when we talk about the intention of a relationship and in particular marriage, in marriage, there's a lot of conflict because you learn how to live together if you are living together. But what living apart actually does is that it removes the tension, right? There's less friction, more intention about your relationships. You no longer have to worry about the trivial, nonsensical, daily, cohabitation issues. Like things like who ate my leftovers, right? Why did you leave your socks and shoes on the floor and not put them away? And those are trivial little things. Do I like almond milk or you versus want to drink normal cow milk? All of these get removed when couples are actually living apart, right? So 70% of conflict, up to 80% of the conflict that is normally in the house actually gets removed. If we even take it back to statistics, in the year 2023, there was about just over 22,000 divorces. 55% of those were in the Black community. And even now, that statistic actually grows by up to 10% year on year. So if we remove the friction, because that's where part of the reasons why there's such a high divorce rate, you actually then become intentional about your quality time. And it's not about the quantity of time that you spend together. It's not a routine that you see each other and every single day becomes mundane. Now you actually look forward to having time together. You shift the conversations that you are actually having. You actually have broader and deeper conversations because you're spending less time together, but you're intentional about how you actually spend time. You build emotional safety together, and that gets strengthened because you no longer get reduced to burnout and resentment. All of that essentially gets eliminated by living separate lives. And while living together looks beautiful, for a lot of couples, the reality of it does in most cases chip away at the partnerships that people have that they've worked so hard to build before they started living together. This is why when you are dating, it seems like you are thriving. And then all of a sudden, when you're married, things start to fall apart. Let's acknowledge that successful marriages aren't defined by the shared walls that we have. They are defined by mutual respect and the courage to design the relationship that actually works for us. So I do honestly believe that living apart would definitely strengthen any marriage, so that you remove the battles from the battlefield and you thrive based on respect and accountability and intention for each other.
Sandra, let's hear your closing statements for this debate today. Sipati saying, you know what,
Okay.
it's actually about being intentional. And we hear so many stories of, married couples for a long time say, you know what, it's like we're roommates now. We're just there. There's no romance. There's no intention. We're just there in each other's space all the time. It doesn't particularly mean that the relationship is going well. What are your closing statements and your response to the intentionality of these kinds of relationships?
Okay, thank you. It's like I said, I think I said from the beginning, you have to be intentional about the marriage, okay? Now, living together doesn't mean that we always have to be on each other's case, fighting like cats and mouse, behaving like Tom and Jerry. That is not how it is, right? I might get on your nerves, I might chip on your skirts and all that, but it's not about the fight itself. It's about how we are able to constructively argue, find solutions to the problems. Now, if we're living apart, how do I get to know who you are? And that is the most important thing. That's why you said that when you're dating, it's like you're thriving because it's like a mystery, right? You're having all these butterflies in your stomach. You're anxious to get to see your spouse. But then the real work is when you're living together. That is when the family bond starts. I have to get to know you. I have to get to know your quirks. I have to get to know what makes you tick. You have to get to know me. And I said from the beginning that you have to become like a mystery. So every time there's something new about you. Now, the reason why a lot of people tend to become marriages tend to become boring is that people tend to stop putting in the work they are supposed to put in. And then we become lazy. Now, living apart automatically will let you become lazy about your marriage. Trust me, because when you are in it, now you begin to put in the work. You have to make sure that everything is working. Now, when two people are eager to make a marriage work, it works, and it works so beautifully. Regardless of the statistics, regardless of whatever is going on, they are still healthy, happy, beautiful marriages. The couples are still living together. Now, if you're living apart, let's just take a very easy example. If you're living apart, you're living hundreds of miles away from me, and now I am honey. What do I do? Do I now go on to see for another person or to go on to other toys or stuff? How do I do that? How do I bring up my children to understand that a family it consists of a father, a mother, and me as a child? How do I build that? Do I train my children to accept that it is okay for me to be married and to live single and to do things anyhow, to behave like, yeah, I've got a ring on my finger, but yet I'm still very approachable. Or I'm still okay to go out and do things that as a married person I shouldn't do, quote and unquote. You've got to understand that a marriage has to be built in a home. How do I build a home I'm not living with? How do I say I'm building a family with someone I'm not living with? And I said that this thing can be allowed per season, per time, per circumstance, but it shouldn't become a norm. It shouldn't become a lifelong thing. Why do a lot of long distance relationships, why do they fail? We're trying to build it on love, on trust, on communication, on respect, and all that. Yes, we can still do that. We can still build all of this within the home where both father and mother or both husband and wife is, as long as we're both being intentional about making sure that we're building a home, we're building a family, we're building a relationship and marriage that our children will be proud of, to say, I want a marriage that my parents have. How do we do that? It's all up to us. We've got to be intentional about making it work. It's not about the space, it's not about the proximity.
All right, we have to leave it there, Sandra. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. It is heated in here. I'm calling the ambulance. I'm calling the fire department because this was a dynamic debate indeed. Thank you, Sandra, for that conversation that you had with us. That's Sandra Delali, marriage counselor, author, and relationship coach. Thank you as well to Sipati Mbokazi, who is a relationship coach. We really appreciate you both for giving us your time.